Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Chabura public shiur. Tonight we have with us Rabbi Yitzhak Berdugo back with us. We're going to be exploring Thanksgiving and the halachic implications around it. Rabbi Berdugo is no stranger to the Chabura. It's always a privilege to have him, and I highly recommend checking out his previous shiurim with us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, everyone who's going to be listening afterwards. And Chacham, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So this topic, it's a general topic, although it has to do with American holiday, now as a secular American holiday, Thanksgiving. But it's a general topic regarding going in the ways of the goyim. So even if you're not in America and not celebrating Thanksgiving, it still applies to many, many different things that have to do with our daily life, like even wearing a tie, etc. Goes on forever. So actually, I got into this topic a few weeks ago, not because of Thanksgiving, but because of Halloween. Why? Because I was living in a Jewish building for many years. My kids grew up in a Jewish building, pretty much 99% Jews only. They never experienced Halloween. What was Halloween? They only know Purim. That's the holiday that people get dressed up. And then we moved to a house, and the majority of the people here are not Jewish in the community, or even if they are, let's say, half Jewish, they're still celebrating Halloween. And I had to take my kids to therapy because they didn't understand the concept of like, why are these goyim, making their houses look like, there's devils and all these crazy things going on. It's so foreign to them. But I just wanted to go into the whole background and see if there's any heterim for, let's say, putting out candy for the goyim to come and take some candy from you, and B, allowing the children to go and just knock and get some candy from the neighbors' doors. Dressing up, okay, you can say C as well, but this kind of inspired me to get into this topic. And so for a few weeks, I decided to write something on this concept on Halloween, and it happens to tie into Thanksgiving as well, and it ties into many, many other things that we will see. So with that being said, we'll start off. Let me share my screen with you guys. Okay, here, share. This is a source sheet I just prepared. And to show you the extremities of this concept of following the ways of the goyim, we're going to see that there's three main psukim in the Torah that talk about this concept. And we're going to see who it applies to and how far does it apply to different aspects. So the most extreme that I just saw yesterday, looking on Otzar HaChochma, is that you have a sefer called the Mishneh Halachot. And that was written by Rabbi Menashe Klein. He was a rabbi in New York, big, tremendous Talmid Chacham, as the Rambam would say, Talmid Chachamim. And he wrote probably 20 halakim in the sefer, could be more, I forgot, but he wrote many, many halakim. You see in Chelek Yod, in the 10th Chelek, he talks about a very interesting concept. He says, I guess probably maybe this was written in the 60s, I'm not sure, 70s or maybe the 80s. But, in the old days, they used to have the only kosher restaurant you would have was maybe pizza, or maybe you would have a falafel place. That's about it. In Brooklyn, in Borough Park, I don't even know what kind of restaurants they had. Probably just a place to get some herring and schmaltz, whatever. But he talks about this concept that they started creating these stores and restaurants called, Chinese food restaurant or kosher Chinese food. And he got extremely upset. He was being doresh in the Beit Knesset that this is so asur, it's terrible, we can't have this. And just to read from what he says, he talks about also that people were calling drinks sangeri and all these Spanish names for different things, and he really upset him. Glad kosher Chinese food, he couldn't handle that. So he says, somebody asked him, like, why are you getting so on the fence about this concept? So he says, Hine be'emet, where I highlighted, Rak Hashem be'atzmo yesh bo yisur mishum demikre shemoteim. Right, just the name, calling the food Chinese food, that itself is an isur because you're copying their names. And we are commanded, we're commanded to distance ourselves from them, from their food and from their drinks, right, as much as we can. He says the Jewish foods are different from the Goyish foods. Let's see, the skip here. And he says the foods that the goyim cause you to do avodah zarah. If you cook their types of foods, right? On the Yisura Behukotehem, you are going to be transgressing by cooking their types of food. And he goes so far to say, in the end, I just highlighted some, copied some parts from this shoot. It says, it's forbidden to enter restaurants that have these goyish names to them. And any restaurant that has, just foods that are named, these type of foods, or names of these types of foods. You can't even go or participate in any wedding or any other events that are serving these types of foods. So the Mishnah Halachot, that's like probably one of the most extreme opinions I've seen, is how far they take this isur of ubihukotechem lo telechu. So, it's very fascinating. I was just thinking when I was reading this, I'm like, in the Gemara, you have so many foods that are non-Jewish foods that, we were eating, the Tanaim, Amoraim were eating. They talk about kuta habavli, some type of sour fermented yogurt bread dish. They had murias, they had all these fermented fish, and these are all goyish names. They're using the local names, and they were eating this. Even the Gemara talks about Bishul Yisrael, the types of foods that are okay, what are not okay. And of course, they would go to the market and buy certain foods from the goyim that had no kashrut problems. So it was very fascinating to read this. But anyways, you see that you can't eat sushi, you can't eat Chinese food according to this shita. So now we get a little closer to Thanksgiving. The Sefer Pahad Yitzhak. I'm just, this is an introduction to, why we're getting into this sugya. You have the Pahad Yitzhak, who is Rabbi Yitzhak Hunter from New York, from Europe to New York, and he doesn't, in his teshuvah, he doesn't talk about the name Thanksgiving, but he's referring to Thanksgiving, and there he refers to, he's saying, the main thing, if it was a one-time thing of some type of celebration, maybe that's okay, whatever. I don't want to say an example, but a one-time celebration would be okay. However, since here, since here we have a yearly holiday, and it's in the calendar, he says, so therefore, if you're celebrating this holiday on that day, this yearly date, then you are joining yourself in this moed, and having a new moed, and that's not based off the Torah, that's very, very terrible. That's a big no-no. So again, he held it's asur. Then you have Rav David Cohen, is a more moderate, modern posek in New York. Tami Chacham, of course, he talks about as well. He says Thanksgiving, it's a machloket, and in the end, he says, in my opinion, to eat turkey for the sake of the holiday is prohibited by the rule of Tosafot. So we're going to get into this Tosafot and dissect it, since it's an irrational rule of theirs, and following it is improper. Okay, then this is extremely extreme. Rav Avigdor Miller, and there he writes that I just want to thanks to Jesse for showing me this morning. He's saying that Thanksgiving is a holiday manufactured by Gentiles for the purpose of going to church. Is that true? I don't think so. And he says, and that was the original purpose, and therefore it's avodah zarah, and it's forbidden to participate in such a thing. And if you eat turkey, you're an ovid avodah zarah. And that's my opinion. He's saying, in the end, he says he's going so far to say, I think it's yereg val ya'avor. You have to, if somebody says, eat this turkey on Thanksgiving or die, you die. It could be he's just talking very hyperbolic, but that's how much they're taking this concept of buchokotehim into their daily life. So now let's get into the crux of this sugya, and there is some iyun that has to be done to really properly understand it. And from this, we'll be able to see where are these different extremes coming from. I found in this Sidur, Alat Libi, here he brings down not even to say Tahanun on Thanksgiving. This is somebody sent this to me, Rabbi Isaac Sassoon. Here in this Sidur, he's saying, we don't say it's American rabbi from Sassoon, from the family from Iraq. And there they write, or from Bombay, I think. So there you're right, it's not even the Tahanun on Thanksgiving. And I know the S&P rabbis also are very into Thanksgiving. So yes, two extremes. So let's see the Mekorot from the Gemara. So the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, it talks about the different methods of capital punishment. So how would they do one of the 4 capital punishments is they would cut off the person's head. So mitzvat neheragim hayu matizin et rosh b'saif. They would take a knife, a cleaver, kederech shemalchut asa, just like the goyim they would do, the same way the Jewish people would cut off the people's heads with a knife, with a sword. Rabbi Yehuda Omer nivur huzeh. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he says that is despicable. That's disgusting. We don't do that. Ele manichin et rosho ala sadan. So rather, what's a not as minuval way to do it? We take the head, the person's head, we put it on a sadan, and they put it on something but base, vikotzetz vikofitz, and then you take a cleaver there to the brains, and you actually cut it off. So Amrulo in mitam minuvelet mizo. So the Hachamim said back to Rabbi Yehuda, excuse me, you said that our version is very disgusting. Yours is even worse. So that's the Mishnah. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Tanya, Omer lehen Rabbi Yehuda lachamim. So Rabbi Yehuda, there was some more information, some more conversation in this, and although it wasn't brought in the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to tell us what happened in this Peraita. It says, Afani yodea shemita minuveleti. So Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, I know that this is also very minuval. It's a disgusting type of death. Aval ma a'aseh, but what can I do? Shere amra Torah, it says in the Torah, ubechukotehem lo telechu. You're not allowed to go in their ways. Follow their. The word hok here is very ambiguous. Hok usually means the law, but in their ways, let's say for better understanding, you can't follow their ways. So the Rabbanan, the rabbis, they said, Kevan dichtiv saif beoraita. Since in the Torah it talks about saif using the sword. Before I said knife, but the proper way is sword for the Hachamim and the knife for Rabbi Yehuda. So since the Torah talks about saif, lo minayhu kagamrinan. So this is a big yesod. He says, we're not learning from the goyim. Since the Torah talks about it, we are not copying, we're not imitating the goyim. Dilo tema achi, because if you don't say what I'm saying, ha detanya sorfin al melachim velo midarchei amori. Right? So how is it that we would burn for the kings when a king would die? One part of the celebration, but one of the mourning aspects to it, they would burn the belongings, the possessions of the kings. So we have a teaching from the I think it's a Sifri that teaches us that you're allowed to burn when the king dies, a Jewish king dies, we burn his possessions, and it's not something that we're imitating Darkei Mori, another way of saying the ways of the Goyim. Because if it was so, how could we do it? It would be Isur because we're copying, mimicking the Goyim. So Ella, says the Gemara, Kevan dichtiv serefa beoraita. This is the main point. Since the Torah tells us, right, we have a place in Yirmiyahu. The Oraita here is referring also to it. Nach, since we have a Mikor in the Torah, in the Tanakh, we are not learning from the Goyim. So remember this Gemara. This is the first Gemara that we come across the concept of there's no prohibition of doing something when we can find the base for it in the Torah. However, now, a few Masechtot later, we have in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, actually it's the Mishnah, it talks about the holidays of the Goyim, where you're not allowed to do business with them in Eretz Yisrael for 3 days before, in Chutz La'aretz 1 day before, or on the day of Mechila. So it talks about the different holidays. And one of it says, V'yom haleda, v'yom amita, the birthday of a king and the death of a king, the day that he dies. Divrei Rabbi Meir. The rabbis say no. Only when they burn stuff on that day, then you have avodah zarah, v'shein b'serifah. But if they don't burn on that day, ein ba'avodah zarah. Then there's no idolism happening at that event, and therefore it would be okay. So now the Gemara goes on and discusses this mahloket between Hachamim and Rabbi Meir. So Michlad de Rabbi Meir savar lo shna mita sheish b'serifah v'lo shna mita shein b'serifah palhei bal abodei kohavim. right? So the Rabbi Meir, right, he says you're not allowed to participate in these days or do business with the goyim on these days, regardless if they're burning things or if they're not burning things. It's going to be asur no matter what. So the Gemara says, Alma, so it deducts from here, deduces serefa lav hukahi. So we see that burning is not the hukah here, right? That the burning is not the problem. It's rather the fact that you're celebrating on that day. And from the fact that the rabbi said, right, the rabbi said when there's serefa there, then there's avodah zarah. So they hold serefa hukahi, that the burning itself is the hukah, is the problem, and therefore we're not allowed to do it. But the Gemara says, remember, we just brought that in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. You're allowed to burn for the king, for the Jewish kings. It's not a problem. It's not copying the goyim. And the Gemara says, and if it was a chok, how could we do it? So here the Gemara gives a very different answer than what we had before in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. So it says here, everybody agrees that when you're burning, that's not a chok. Ela hashivutahi. Rather, when you are burning, it is just something that is done for the hashivut, for the kavod, for the simple understanding of hashivuta means you're doing it for the hashivut of the king, and therefore that's not a problem. So we don't have to get more into this Gemara, but you see the basic differences. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says the reason why it's not a problem is because the Torah talks about it before. Why are we allowed to, cut the head off with a sword, according to Hachamim? It's because we already have it predated in the Torah that they would do this, that they would cut in this fashion. Just like also for the Serefa, we find a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. However, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says a different answer. Since it's done for hashivut, it's done for importance, it's done for kavod, for honor, for glory, then it would be okay. So Tosafot, Kidarko, like his fashion, he sees these two Gemarot, and he sees that there's a contradiction, right? Because look at the Tosafot in Avodah Zarah. He says, Tema, Mai kaparich dilma leolam hukahi, bekevan dechti beraita lo gamrin minayhu. Right? He says, I don't understand, why are we asking Mai kaparich dilma leolam hukahi? Perhaps it's a huk, but since it's written in the Torah, it's not going to be a problem. He's asking on the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Why didn't the Gemara in Avodah Zarah give the same answer that it gave in Sanhedrin? That's pretty much what he's saying. Why does it talk about, oh no, we have it's hashivuta here. Just talk about, no, we have a pasuk. So Tosafot comes up. It's really the Piresh Hari, the Bale Tosafot. He gives a chiluk between two types of hukim, right? And this is Trei Dinin, Tzvei Din. This is the classic answer for contradictions in the Gemarot. And this is, I don't know if anybody was with the class that we gave on Shitat Rabbeinu Tam on Shabbat. There's also similar. There's a stira in the Gemarot. In Gemara and Shabbat, it talks about the time from when the sun goes down until it's nighttime, it's only 3/4 of the meal. That's what the Gemara says in Shabbat. But then if you go to Gemara in Psachim, it talks about the time from sunset all the way till nighttime. It says it's 4 meal. So how do we deal with that? So he says there's two types of sunsets, right? So similar here, we're going to have the same shita, the same approach, taking two different gemarot and trying to make shalom between them. So he says, Perushri, Tetrei gavne hukahab. There's two types of hukim. Ehad she'osin leshem hok la'abodat kochavim. There's one type that they do as a hok. It's a rule for the sake of idol, for the sake of idols. Ve'ehad she'osin leshem dat hevel v'shtut shelehem. And there's another type that they do just for stupidity. It's just something that they do. They eat turkeys on a day. There's nothing really for avodah zarah, but it's just a stupid thing that they do. So that is the different types that he does, and therefore he says, and here in our Gemara, they are dealing with a case where it's a hok for avodat kochavim, and that's why you need to. Let me see what's talking about. Maybe it's going off the other Gemara. והכי במשמעות מהירי באותו חוק שעושים לשם עבוד כוכבים. והכי פירושו, and let's just read this so I remember this. רבי מאיר סבר שרפה לאו חוקה היא לעבוד כוכבים. לאחי פריך ויחוקה לעבוד כוכבים, מננחי שרפינן, והכתיב בחוקותיהם לא תלכו. ואחר דכתיב באורייתא יש לאסור כיוון שלהם הוא חוק לעבוד כוכבים, דומיה דמצבק. Right, so he's saying, in essence, is if the Torah, all things are asur, but when the Torah tells us something, then it's okay only if it's something that's not done for avodat kochavim. If it's not done to serve idols, then it's going to be okay if we can find somewhere in the Torah that allows it. But if it's something for, let's say it's something for avodah zarah, and the Torah talks about it, which it wouldn't, then it doesn't matter. Since it's done for avodah zarah, since the goyim do it for avodah zarah, we cannot mimic that no matter what. Only things that are done for shitut, for done stupidity things, eating turkey on Thanksgiving, then we are allowed to copy them if we can find somewhere one pasuk that says that you're allowed to eat turkeys, or that the Jews were eating turkeys, or some type of mikor somewhere. So those are the chilukim he's giving. You know, you can plug it back in after and do some yun on this. And he brings a mikor for this. He says, for example, even the matzeva, we're not allowed to make these type of, I don't know the proper English word for a matzeva, but this type of rock or area that, you know, they would do for avodah zarah. And even though the avot used to do it, since it was done for avodat kochavim, for avodah zarah, says Tosafot, we're not allowed to do it. And Hashem actually says it's asur. You're not, you open up Mishnah Torah, you open up the halacha, you're not allowed to make a matzeva, right? Even if you're doing it for the sake of Hashem. So he says, you have precedence for what I'm saying. You have the fact that the Torah tells us something that the Avot used to do, but at the same time, since the Goyim started doing it for their ways, therefore we can no longer do it anymore. So again, only when you have things that are done for Shetut, and the Goyim do it, like eating turkeys, then you could do it if you can find a pasuk. If you can't find a pasuk, no. So this is the basis for the most extreme opinion of when I say the most extreme, meaning the most prohibited, the one that pretty much makes almost everything asur if you can't find a pasuk. Because according to this Tosafot, if you can't find a mikor anywhere in the Tanakh, you can no longer do it. Not only that, it sounds from him that even if you find a mikor, if the goyim start doing it for avodah zarah, we should also make it asur, perhaps. And we're going to see that. That's, for example, you know, on Shavuot, there was a minhag to put flowers and trees in the Beit Knesset for Shavuot. But then, since the Christians started doing that for their holidays, you have many poskim like the Gaon de Vilna says, no, we're not allowed to do that anymore. So it's all based off this. According to this Tosafot, again, almost everything, if there's no matter what the reason is, if you can't find a mikor for it, goodbye, Charlie, you cannot do that goyish custom anymore. Right? If you want to see here the Chokhmat Adam, he just gives a nice sikum of the Shita of Tosafot, and he's posek like that as well. The Gra as well. So the Gra, he says, according to the Gra's the Gaon de Vilna is posek like this Tosafot, and he says, how do we now read in the Gemara of Ela Hashivutahi? Right? Because the Gemara says it's Hashivutahi. That sounds like it's for kavod, but according to Tosafot, you know, it doesn't care about kavod. He says, Lav sheish tam b'davar k'divrei Haran. It's not like with the Ran we're going to see soon. Ela rotze lomar chok shelehem ala adam hashuv lesorfan velav mishum avodat kochavim. Rather, it was a chok that they would do, and therefore, since it wasn't for avodah zarah, we can find elav mishum avodah zarah. Since we have a mikor in the Torah, it's okay. So that's, you know, it's very hard to read it, but that's how the Balei Tosafot learn hashivutahi. Right. Okay. So I just wrote a little sikum here because I started writing a little teshuvah, so I just copied and pasted from what I wrote. So the Ran, he has a different approach. He says, "Shelo asra Torah ela chukot shel avodat kochavim elu devarim shel hevel ubatela." Right? He says the Torah, when it says that's only prohibiting things that are done because of hevel ubatela. There's no reason to it. It's stupidity. And it's done for the sake of avodah zarah. So it has to be two things: dumb, and it's done for avodah zarah. So they dress in this certain way for the sake of their gods, and they're okay. Then you can't do it. About divarim shel tam. But anytime you have something that's reasonable, sharu, it's okay. Right? The reason behind it is we burn. They were burning it for the kavod of the kings, and that's it. Very simple. He's learning the pashup shat of the Gemara. Hashivutahi, it's kavod. There's a reason. Once there's a reason, it's okay. The Rivash as well. The Rivash, he's talking about. This is actually interesting. A minhag that the Ishmaelim would do at the 7 days after somebody passes away. They would go every day to the kever and say something, and the Jewish people started copying this custom. And somebody is asking him, like, what are we going to do about this? So he says, even though the Goyim do it, it's not asur mishum dachemori she'im banu lomar ken, because if we're going to be like this, if we're going to say it's asur, ne'esor ha'hefsed, even doing a hefsed, just a eulogy, is going to be forbidden, because the Ovdei Kochavim do it as well. So he's saying pretty much in ledavar stof. If you're going to say pretty much go with the approach of Tosafot, almost everything is going to be asur, because they're going to do everything. The Maharik as well, he says, so he has a different thing. He wants it's his own pshat. He says, and he says, Lefi aniut dati, is that anything that has pritzut, it has, it's something that's not modest, and it's taking away from the tzniut, and also taking away from the anava, because Bnei Israel, they're humble people. That's going to be asur. So it's hard to see this in the Gemarot that we just read, but this is what he says seems to him. And the poskim, they actually use this for many things as well, for dressing in certain clothing, etc. Because if there's a problem of sniut, it's a isur of behukotehim. So the Ran in Sanhedrin, it's interesting. If you go at the Gaon de Vilna, if you see it inside, he's pondered by the Ran, the Rivash, the Maharik, and believe it or not, the Rama on the Shulchan Aruch, he's going with those opinions. He's not going with Tosafot. He doesn't go like Tosafot, so he's not as Mahmir. But the Gaon de Vilna is saying all these rabbis, they have a stira. Tosafot, the Ri, had a beautiful stira, a beautiful answer. You have one Gemara in Sanhedrin, one Gemara in Avodah Zarah, and the only way to answer them, seemingly says the Gaon de Vilna, is according to the way that the Ri answered it. So he's saying we have to push them off, and we have to be machmir, and that's why for even his shita, you can't have trees or different flowers during Shavuot. However, I saw that the Ran on the Gemara and Sanhedrin, which seems like the Gaon de Vilna didn't see it, he explains the exact reason of Hashivuta is because of Tam. So he's learning Hashivuta is Tam. On the Gemara, I couldn't find anybody else besides the Ran and Rabbeinu Yonah. I didn't bring it here. I didn't bring it. But they both hold on the Gemara, Hashivutahi is a simple pshat. It means Tam. So how do we answer the stira of Tosafot? Right? Tosafot asks this question. We have two different Gemarot. Again, one Gemara says it's because we have a pasuk in the Torah, and the other one says it's because Hashivutahi. So I was thinking when I was working on this sugya a couple of weeks ago, it's very simple. It's the same thing. If the Torah tells you that they were doing something, that the Torah is allowing something, it's permitting something, obviously that means what? That it's logical. It's not a problem. It's done for a logical reason. It's not a hook without any reason behind it. So therefore, it's okay. And therefore, the other Gemara in Avodah Zarah, once it says Hashivutahi, then it's not a problem because that's the exact reason as the Gemara in Sanhedrin. It's just telling you the reason why the other Gemara says it's okay. Again, one pasuk, one Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us it's okay because we have a pasuk. The other one says it's okay because it's logical, it's done for kavod, but they're the same thing, just bringing from different mikorot. Right? We don't have to make a whole chiluk. Again, this is just a shita that I see the Ran, Rabbeinu Yonah, they're learning Gemara very simply. Why make this whole Tzvei Dinim, two different chilukim in the Gemara? You don't have to do that. It's very simple. One is just talking about the pasuk, and therefore the obvious reason why I brought a pasuk is because it's logical. And that's it. And once you have that, that is the most, let's say, permitting method of understanding this Gemara, because only things that make no sense, or we're going to say things that would cause somebody to do avodah zarah, that would be a problem. Anything else, just because a goy wears a tie or a goy does something, or he eats a turkey on a certain day, if there's no reason that ties that into avodah zarah, then it would be okay, as long as it doesn't cause avodah zarah. It's not something that they do mishum avodah zarah. And that's the approach, seemingly, of the Shulchan Aruch. That's the approach of the Ramah as well. And not like all these other poskim that are, we saw Rabbi David Cohen above, he's going with the Shita of Tosafot. So another big yesod in the sugya is, which goyim are we talking about? When the Torah says, what goyim are we talking about? So there's 3 psukim, like I mentioned before. Right? Right, so there in Vayikra, who is the goyim it's talking about? The goyim that I'm going to send from this land, meaning from Eretz Canaan. Those goyim, the Shiva Amim, those are the goyim that you're not allowed to copy. Right? Another pasuk, it says, you're going to go and you're going to inherit that land. Don't go, be careful, don't follow them. Again, it's talking about specifically these goyim. And then another pasuk in Vayikra that we see, it's talking about the Mitzrim. It connects the Mitzrim with the Sheva Amim. Right? It's like, don't do like the Mitzrim and Eretz Canaan. So it's grouping them together. But that's all we have in the Torah. The Torah is only talking about these specific people. So what about other of the Avodah Zarah in other countries? Who knows? The Celtics that were pretty much Halloween came from the Celtics, or Celtics, however you pronounce it. So Sefer Yirim, Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz, he actually is posek like this. So he writes this when he's counting the mitzvot. He says, "V'kasher yizhira katuv al maaseh shiva umot v'hukotechem kach yizhir al maaseh mitzrim." So just like it warned us about the Shiva Amim, so too about the Mitzrim. Because there's a hekesh between them. It's connected. Like we just saw. So from the Sefer Yirim, and a lot of poskim bring this, it's only asur for Mitzrim and the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael, and that's it. There's no other isur from the Torah, no, for any other nation besides these. However, we see the Sefer HaChinuch. He says, he says, he brings down from the Psukim that talking about the Shiva Amim, etc. And he says, for all goyim as well. We're going to say, is that goyim, like even if they're not of the Avodah Zarah? No, he says, no. The reason is because they also, are disconnected from Hashem, and they do Avodah Zarah, and it's going to cause you to do that as well. So, simply, of course, the Sefer HaChinuch is learning that it's specifically to all people who are over Avodah Zarah. It's an Yisur. So now what about Christians, let's say, the Notzrim? The Christians, everybody knows this machloket. According to Harambam, Christians are over the Avodah Zarah. The fact that they believe in the Yashka, Yeshu as a God, that itself is Avodah Zarah. But we know you have other Rishonim, and the Ramaz posek like this, that's the Goyim, they don't have an Isur on Shituf, right? Since they believe in a Trinity, and it's different parts, however you explain it, and there's 1,000 different ways to explain it, since they have that concept, for them it's okay. For us it's Asur, but for them it's okay, so therefore they're not considered of the Avodah Zarah, and therefore there's a lot of halachic, different nafkaminot, different differences that you can be lenient with if you don't consider them to be of the Avodah Zarah. Right? There was even regarding, we're going to see soon, Muslims as well. It was a machlok. The Rambam was the one, and as he get it to Tema, and said that they're not of the Avodah Zarah. But there were other people that said, no, if they tell you have to convert because of Muhammad and believe in, say whatever they have to say. Maybe Yosef can tell me what exactly they have to say. Actually, don't say. This is if you say that itself, you have to be killed for that. And that's why the Rambam, his father as well, wrote a whole thing saying, no, it's not considered Avodah Zarah. But anyways, so the question is, so the Christians, are we allowed to copy what they're doing? Because for them, it's not considered Avodah Zarah. However, for us, it is. So the Melamed Le'oil, he writes, he says, Davar yadu she'af rova poskim hagoyim ein muzharin ala shituf. Right? Most poskim hold that goyim, they're allowed to have this, Trinity. For Jewish people, it's hayav mita, like all other avodah zarah. So therefore, it's going to be forbidden for us to copy Christian customs as well. The Rivash, we brought him above, he held that they were talking about going to the kever every day for the 7 days after the person dies. And from the context, you could tell that he held the Yishmaelim also. There's a Yisur of copying the Yishmaelim. He held it's a Yisur to copy them. And only because it's done for a good reason, because it's for the Kavod of the Med, therefore it's not a problem. But from the context of his Teshuvah, he held that even copying the Yishmaelim is Asur. However, you have, I didn't bring it here, but you have the Chida, you have many poskim that hold by Yishmaelim, there's no problem. And they go so far to say that, of course, even though the way they dress it, you can copy the way they dress. Even I saw there's Hasidic rabbis, a lot of European rabbis, when they went to Eretz Yisrael, and they took upon the way that the Yerushalmi Sfaradim used to dress. Now it's pretty much like their Toldos Aaron or the Breslovers, how they dress with that kaftan and the brown one on top of it. They held dafka to wear it because they have a mikor. They say I come from. That's what Avraham Avinu used to wear. Of course, I don't know how they know that, but they're saying that. So they hold that's okay to wear Muslim dress. It's not a problem, and especially the different things that are for kavod. It's not a problem as well. So you have different parameters of who it's going by. Now the Harambam. The question is, especially for us in the Habura, what does the Rambam hold? Is it all goyim or is it only of the avodah zarah? So the Rambam, if you read the actual Kitvei Yad editions, always in the printed editions, they would change the word goyim to of the kohavim because for the Christians, etc. But the Rambam himself in the actual Kitav Yad, he writes, "En holchim bechukot hagoyim, velo midamim lahen, lo b'malbush, velo b'sa'ar, v'chayutz ben." You can't copy in all these different things that they do. And he says, "Velo telechu bechukot hagoy." And if you read the Avodat Melech, he's a Perush on the Rambam. He writes, and I'm going to separate you guys from this nation, from these nations. Right? We didn't read in the Rambam, but I think we should actually. It says, let's go back to the Rambam. It's a big yesod in how to understand the Rambam. And this Rambam is so ambiguous that some people, you have two different approaches in learning this Rambam. I'm going to read it again from the Rambam. You don't follow the ways of the goyim. Don't mimic them. Lo b'malbush, not in the way they dress. Velo b'se'ar, not in their hairstyles. V'chayutz behen, and the similar. Shneimar velo telichu b'chukot hagoy. V'neimar u'b'chotehem lo telechu. V'neimar yishamel lecha petina keshaharim. Okay, so 3 psukim like we brought. Hakol b'inyan echad hu mazhir. Right, the Torah, it's all the same isur that it's warning us. Shelo yidameh lehen. We can't be similar to them. Ele yeh Yisrael, rather a Jew, he has to be, the Rambam never calls a Jew, he says Yisrael. We're all Israelis. Muvdal mehen v'yadu b'malbusho. Already a Jew has to be separate from the goyim, v'yadu b'malbusho, and noticeable in the way he dresses. Ubishar ma'asav, in all his other mannerisms. Kemoshu muvdal mehen b'mada'o b'de'otav. Just like a Jew thinks differently in his connection with Hashem and in his thought process and his midot, etc. So too, we have to be different in our actions and clothing and styles as well. And then he brings in here, V'chein omer, so the Ram continues even further. V'chein omer v'evdel etchem min ha'amim. Another pasuk, Hashem says, I'm going to separate you from the people. You're going to be different from them. Lo yalbesh b'babush hamiyuchal lehen, v'lo yigadel tzitzit rosho. Okay. So the Rambam, why did he go off again and write V'chein omer v'evdel etchem min ha'amim? Right before he's talking about lo taseh, lo taseh, lo taseh, and now he's saying Hashem's saying this is going to happen. You're going to be different. So the Avodat HaMelech, he catches onto that and he says Uma shekatav Rabbeinu v'chein omer v'evdel etchem min ha'amim v'hu miyutar. It's extra lechora legamrei completely. V'nei midivrei Rabbeinu, from the Rambam, nireh barur delav debchukotehem lo telihu kai al kol ha'umot bechol zmanim. Says the Avodat HaMelech that it seems from the Rambam that the Isura b'chukotehim applies to all goyim no matter what, even if they're not Oved Avodah Zarah, right? Sounds like the Rivash, even Ishmaelim, it would be asur to copy them because we have to be different than them. However, so I wanted to do some more research into this. If you notice, always in the beginning of the Rambams of each Sefer, he counts the minyan mitzvot, and the Rambam himself wrote these. It's not somebody added them afterwards. The Rambam himself wrote these, and there he talks about the different mitzvot that he's going to talk about here in Avodah Zarah, and he counts them 33, 34, 35. So 33, shelo lichrot berit le'ovdei Avodah Zarah. He writes, you can't make a covenant with them, some type of agreement with them. We can't have pity on them, or we can't. There's different aspects of that. They're not allowed to dwell in our lands. And Lamid Vav, we're not allowed to be similar in their ways and in their dress. So if you read this Rambam, he's clearly telling us when he's counting the mitzvot, it's going off of the Avodah Zarah. Who is Asur? Who is this Isur going off of? People that are Oved Avodah Zarah. So therefore, it's very hard to read what the Avodat HaMelech is saying, that, oh no, it's the Rambam held it's talking about all goyim. No, from the Rambam himself in the Minyan Mitzvot, he tells us straight up, it's only going, it's a connection of the people that do Avodah Zarah. It's a continuation of the halacha. And that's where the Rambam brought this down in Hilchot Avodat Kochavim, Avodah Zarah. And Sefer Mitzvot, the Rambam, of course, we all know that the Rambam wrote Sefer Mitzvot in Arabic. And there, I checked to see the original word he uses for this. The Rav Kafeh edition, he writes, "Has harash uzharnu milalechet be'avut kofrim." We can't go in the ways of the kofrim. And the word in Arabic is, I don't know how to pronounce it, al-kafar, kofir, very similar. And there I did a search, and everywhere the Rambam uses that word, and Rav Sadia Gaon and all the Gaonim in Arabic, they would use this word to refer to of the Avodah Zarah. That was a term used for Avodah Zarah. And therefore, you see the Rambam, even in Sefer Mitzvot as well, saying that this is only going strictly on of the Avodah Zarah. So we see from all this, from at least Rambam, and besides the fact we saw from Sefer Yirim, and we have the Hinuch as well. So Sefer Yirim, it's only going by the people that the Torah specifically details, which are the Sheva Amim and the Mitzvim. Okay, but then we have the Hinuch and the Rambam that's going out all over the Avodah Zarah. And then we have other people, other shitot, that are saying that it's going off even Yishmaelim to an extent. But the poskim, the modern poskim that I've seen, they hold by Yishmaelim, it's okay. And the Rambam we see as well is talking about only of the Avodah Zarah. Right? There's a whole other thing now. Now, this generation, we have something that they never had. We have secular people or atheist people, people that don't believe in anything. So that would be seemingly probably like the Yishmaelim for sure, or even better in that regard. Fine. So another important topic to talk about this is what things are prohibited in this Isur. So the way that we saw from the poskim, from even Rav, the Mishnah Halachot, that Rav Klein, he's saying that even, eating at a Chinese restaurant or Chinese kosher food restaurant is Asur, how far do you go? The question is that what Chachamim told us? Is that what the poskim held of? So if you see in the Sefer Yirim from Eliezer Mimitz, he actually says, a big yesod, וחכמים פירשו מה המעשים והחוקים שהורגלו לעשות לשם תורה שלהם. The Chachamim, they were the ones that detailed to us what are the things that are forbidden to go and to do. Ubetosefta, so in the Gemara, and with Tosefta as well, I put a link to the Tosefta if you want to read that and just see and all the different things that the Gemara talks about. It's even a machloket there in the Tosefta. If even saying God bless you after somebody sneezes, marpeh, is that darkei morim or not? Actually, the Gaon de Vilna, believe it or not, he held you're not allowed to say God bless you or say marpeh. You can't say guzun to somebody who sneezes. Not only in the Bet Midrash, there it's a machlok in the Bet Midrash or not. He held that it's asur. He goes with the Tanakama in the Beraita there. If you check it out in the Tosefta. So that's another raya. When I was writing, I was saying the Tosafot, he wanted to make this whole chiluk, this whole chidush about there's two types. Only if the Torah tells us it's okay for things that are done for shtut, but you see in the Tosefta that there's all these different things, and Chachamim allowed them, even though there's no place in the entire Tanakh that says it's okay. So that's a very strong question against Tosafot. But regardless, so Sefer Yirim, he says, the Tosefta, what we have in the Gemara, that's what the Chachamim counted or told us, detailed to us that are asur because of this isur. כל מה שהייתה קבלה ביד חכמים שהיו מחוקותיהם. They were the ones that had misorah of what is considered to be part of this isur. And he says, importantly, ואין להוסיף עליהם, ואינה מסברה כי אם בקבלה. We are not allowed to make new things and say, oh, we're not allowed to do it because of חוקותיהם. No, only חכמים have the misorah. Pretty much, חכמים either accepted it, or we're going to see that the Bet Yosef, in the case of Mishnah, he wants to say that the Torah gave the authority to the Hachamim to decide what's going to be considered the Surah of Hokotehem. So already from the Sefer Yerim, you can't come and say, Thanksgiving or dressing a certain way or doing something is going to be, or eating Chinese food is going to be asur because, only what the Hachamim counted. It had to be something with the Hachamim, either because they had a Kabbalah, like I said, or because they had the authority, and nowadays we don't have the authority, and therefore, it wouldn't be a problem. Sefer Mitzvah the Gadol as well. He also says, he counts as well the Smag, Sefer Smag, that it has to be a Kabbalah from them. And the Bet Yosef in the Shulchan Aruch and the Bet Yosef, he writes, he has a question. He says, we see that many people are not machmir to do the things that the Tosefta says. If you go look at the Tosefta, you see all the things. He says people aren't so machmir with this. So he says, he makes a melamed zechut. He says, V'shema mashma lehu. Perhaps these people they're not so strict with all these things that the Tosefta says, she'in lachush mishum darchei mori ela divarim sheuzkeru begamara bilvad. Perhaps maybe these people that are mekel with all these things from the Tosefta, it's because they hold that only what the Gemara said, that's asur. Everything else, no. The Tosefta is not halacha. Because if that wasn't the case, then the Gemara wouldn't have been quiet. The Gemara should have brought it. With this opinion, they hold that the Gemara is all-encompassing, and anything in the Gemara, that's the final word. And if they didn't bring in the Gemara, we don't have to follow that. Right? So many poskim actually go with this Bet Yosef, the Ben Ishai, Rabbi Yosef, and the different Teshuvot. They're all going with this Bet Yosef. However, it's not so simple because the Bet Yosef here is doing just a melamed zechut, right? And this is a big point of contention all the time in the Bet Yosef. For example, does the Bet Yosef allow people to use an eruv, the eruv of Surat HaPetach around the city? On one hand, he owns like the Rambam. In another place, he writes down that the women that they carry their jewelry or they wear jewelry on Shabbat, even though they're not supposed to, it's because they hold nowadays, Shema, he said the same type of Lashon, similar, that perhaps because they hold that nowadays we don't have a Reshut Rabim. Like it goes like Tosafot opinion, that only 600,000 Jews makes a place for Eruv. So again, it's a whole machlok. What does Maran Shulchan Aruch hold? So to here too, the Ben Ishai and Rav Ovadia are saying, no, this is what Maran holds. Although seemingly here, it's just the Melam Zechut he's saying for them. Fine, I already brought that Kesef Mishnah. Okay, so now, what about nowadays? Nowadays, where things have changed. So we didn't go into the history of Thanksgiving and the history of Halloween, and I'm sure maybe in England you guys have also holidays similar to these type of things. We didn't go into the history of it, and you could do it on your own time. Sorry, I'm not a bucky about it. Halloween I did a little bit more research on, but let's say for Halloween, it started off as a Celtic holiday for their pagan gods. Why? Because during the winter time, it just became winter. It gets darker, and then all the harvests start to die. So they're like, wow, this is spooky stuff. There must be some evil spirits. Something's going on during this time. So in order to kind of make shalom and give korbanot to these ghosts and spirits and demons, they would actually bring food and the nicest harvest and leave it outside the house and give it to them. And then it slowly evolved that, okay, instead of actual spirits and leaving the food for the spirits, kids would come and dress up as spirits and then go and collect foods from people's houses. And then when all the Celtics and all these people became Christians, what happened is that the Christians, the early Catholic Church, the 1200s, what they said is, what their tactic for doing kiruv is they would take these non-Jewish holidays, these pagan holidays, and Christianize them by saying, okay, look, you guys like that, you do that, no problem. Let's make it a day of the saints. And I forgot what it's called, but it was the day of the saints and the same practices, but make it a Catholic thing. But then you evolve hundreds of years later, and now completely changed. Now people dress up. They don't dress up. Kids aren't dressing up as spirits. They're dressing up as Mickey Mouse and whoever they want to dress up as. And people are, decorating their house, which is something never was done before. They're decorating it as spooky houses for fun. And they're giving out candies, which wasn't done before. Before they used to do, give actually the best produce of their harvest to these demons that they thought. So it really evolved completely. So how do we look at it? Is it, oh no, assuming we're not going like with the opinions before the Bet Yosef and everybody else, that it's only what Hachamim counted, and we're just going to say that applies, to all things that the Goyim do. Okay, so it started off with something Avodah Zarah, but it changed now to something that's not Avodah Zarah. It's completely secular. Not one person in America, if you ask them, you do this because of Avodah Zarah, they're not going to say no. Even you ask Christians, I saw some Christians, they don't do it because it has pagan sources in it. So nobody is doing Halloween because of, Avodah Zarah. And nobody's doing Thanksgiving nowadays because of, let's say if you want to say that the early pilgrims in the early 17th century, they were, very religious Christians and they wanted to make a day. And even the turkey thing, nobody knows what, they don't know what they were eating back then. The turkey is a very common food in America, and it's good for when you have a feast of a lot of people, you have a big bird instead of a small chicken. And so they would give a turkey. Nobody knows the mikor for this. So what about nowadays when things were started off by Goyim or pagan practices, but they evolved into secular holidays, right? So we saw above this, actually, I don't know if I brought it, but Rambam quoted the Sifri, is that the whole point, the whole Isur, the Ta'amad Dikra, is because Shema tidameh lehem v'ta'aseh k'maaseh. You're going to be like them, and you're going to come to do like them, right? If you start copying the way they dress and the certain things that are prohibited, then you're going to start copying them, and you're going to actually come to serve their gods. So obviously, if we're just going to go based off reason, if nowadays nobody is doing these holidays because of Avodah Zarah, so even if you're copying them, it's not going to lead to the prohibition that the Torah wanted us to, right? So therefore, there would be no Yisur for that. You have the Ran as well. Same thing. He says, Shema yimashecha adam acharin kimotam. Perhaps the person can be drawn to do these things, and therefore you're going to do it. So again, the same reason applies. Now the Bach, he actually says, all the things that the Hachamim counted, and like we saw that according to many Shittot, only if they have a Misorah, that's what they've received in the Kabbalah, or the Hachamim were posek. Those things that are Asur, he says that even if nowadays they don't apply, pretty much nobody's doing them for Avodah Zarah anymore. Like for example, certain haircuts that the Gemara talks about is Asur. Or let's say growing a mohawk, or you're like the hair in the back just long, straight. So even if nobody is doing that nowadays for Avodah Zarah, still Asur, because that's what the Hachamim already counted, and we can't change that. So from the Bach, it's mashma, things that the Hachamim didn't count, then it would be okay if the mitziut, if the situation changed, right? This is not like the Hatam Sofer talks about, interesting, clean shaving, right? Before, in Europe, before, that's 300-400 years ago, nobody was doing clean shaving. Everybody had, they would maybe cut their beard with scissors, but they weren't doing clean shaving at all. Only probably until the powder came up and it would burn stuff off your face, burn off the hairs off your face. Then, people started doing that. So the Hatam Sofer wanted to deal, is that considered, by you shaving your hair, your beard, is that considered are you transgressing? Because that's the Goyish way of shaving. The Rambam himself actually talks about in Hilchot Avodah Zarah that's how the Kumrim, the priest, even the Christian priest, they cut their hair a certain way and they had clean shaving, and therefore there's some type of, we don't do that. So the Hatam Sofer says, no, since it's a minhag already accepted that people are clean shaven, we're going to be toleh, we're going to say, it must have been, it was started off beheter, and we were doing it before they did it, and we're not copying them. But again, it implies that if they did it first, and we started copying from them, and even though it's not anymore practice for Avodah Zarah, it's still be asur. So you have different shittot. The turkey thing is about the Misorah for turkey. I wanted to talk about that, but it's just going to be another hour. It's even maybe more, a long sugya. So maybe next Thanksgiving we'll talk about the turkey. But in general, just to do a little sikum, is that we see from the Gemara, the parameters of Bechukotei Motelechu were very strict to things that are similar to Avodah Zarah. And Tosfot wanted to give an answer that creates a prohibition for anything that Goyim do without, that's just done for shtut. And therefore, a Jew cannot copy it at all. But we saw other opinions holding, no, there's no real stira, and it's just the Gemara is, two different Gemara looking at two different ways, but the same exact answer, just saying it and expressing it in two different ways. And based off that allows us to be able to, do normal things that, let's say, living in America, it's wearing you're cold, so you wear a sweater. Okay, but Goyim also wear a sweater. Okay, it doesn't matter. Since there's a good reason for it, then it's going to be okay. And the Rambam as well, let's say we're going with the Rambam. All this is only going off of people that are over Avodah Zarah. If people don't do Avodah Zarah, there's no Isur to copy them, because it's not going to lead to that type of Isur that the Torah doesn't want us to do. And just I didn't talk about this, but even if you read the Rambam, although the Rambam starts off the halacha very general, and it sounds like, and I saw there's some poskim that say, according to the Rambam, Jewish people have to have their own dress, their own style of clothing. But the Rambam, in my opinion, is that he's starting with a very general introduction to it, and then he's going to pretty much go and tell you point by point, what does it mean, this haircut, that you can't have the same hair as them. So he tells us what type of hair you can have. Everything he tells us exactly. The only thing is he doesn't tell us about the clothing, what type of clothing. And you can give different answers, perhaps because nobody was wearing this clothing anymore, so therefore the Rambam couldn't talk about it, because he doesn't know what the type of clothing of the Avodah Zarah was. But that's a different topic. But in the end, especially nowadays when you're doing something, it's a secular holiday where there's no religious beliefs behind it, then there's definitely a big reason to allow it, since, again, number one, it's not something brought down from in the Tosefta or the Gemara. And we saw the Bet Yosef says it has to be at least in the Gemara or the Tosefta. Number two, it's by secular people, and those are goyim that are not Avodah Zarah. And number three, it's not done for anything. So, if there's any questions, we'll talk about it. But I'm not going to go into the whole history of Turkey, because that's a long one. Mechila. I apologize for the false advertisement. If people came because they wanted to hear about Turkey, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Chacham, for that incredible presentation. If anyone has any questions, comments, they can unmute, raise their hand, or write in the chat box.
Yeah, I see that Mr.
Well,
Robert.
I'll say that I want to hear about Turkey, and I don't want to have to wait until next year.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as possible would be appreciated.
Oh yeah, a little kitsur of Turkey if you guys want. I mean,
no, I'm saying it is an entire shiur. I'm just saying I don't want to have to wait a whole year for it. So if you could expedite that, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, in simple, I actually, Rabbi Slifkin, he does every couple of years, he does like a feast of biblical creatures or whatever it's called. I forgot what it's called. And he wanted to serve peacock this year. So peacock is something that the Gemara talks about, tavas. It's in the Gemara. It's in the Tanakh as well. But nobody really was eating it in Europe for many, many years. You have some in Morocco, they have some traditions that we hear that people were eating it. And in Italy, we have some Sfarim that they wrote it down. They even drew pictures of it. But there's no real active Mesorah nowadays of eating turkey. The only rabbi I know is my own rabbi, who actually did shechted a turkey in New York in his community, and he ate it. But the question is do birds need a Mesorah? So it's all really based off one Rashi that says a bird needs a Mesorah, because since we're not baki in knowing what's considered to be dores or not, we're not allowed to eat those birds. Let me back up a little bit. The Gemara says, the Torah says there's around 24 birds that are prohibited to eat. It doesn't talk about what is kasher, like the animals, the behemoth. It tells us what are the simanim that are kasher. But by the birds, it just tells us these birds you can't eat. It doesn't tell us the birds that we can eat. So already in the time of Chazal, they didn't have any. They forgot all these birds, what the 24 birds were. Maybe most people forgot. I don't know if everybody forgot, but they didn't know these 24 birds. Or maybe only experts knew about them. And therefore, Chachamim developed a system to give us that would allow us to just see a new bird without any tradition, and test to see if it's a kosher bird or not. And it's pretty much 3 or 4 simanim. So one siman is if it has a zefik. Zefik, how do you say that in English? The crop, right? If it has a crop, which is a extra little area and right when it swallows to store some food. If it has that, that's one siman, it's kasher. Another siman the Gemara talks about, the Gemara Chachamim gave us, is if it's it has a kurkavan sheniklaf biyad. It has a extra stomach on the bottom that you can peel off the outer layer with your nail. It's very easy to peel. And then the third siman was that it has etzba yetera, an extra finger. So besides the 3 claws, let's say it has one, according to Rashi, it's one coming from the back, and that's the pretty much accepted one. It has a 4th finger from the back. Like you just look at your chicken or whatever. So these simanim that Chachamim gave us, seemingly, if you check and you have these 3 simanim, it should be okay. And the other thing is, of course, the animal cannot be dores. What does it mean, dores? Simple pshat is that, it can capture a bird with its feet and it eats it. It's how do you say, a hunter bird? I forgot the proper English word to say, but it's dores. It goes and attacks the birds.
A bird of prey.
A bird of prey. Yes, exactly, a bird of prey. So, according to Chachamim, if it has those 3 simanim, it's okay, 100%. Rashi says that, according to, again, there's different ways to learn this. According to Rambam, sounds like even one out of the 3 simanim is okay, as long as you know it's not dores. The question, and to be dores, the Rambam says it's not a problem. You could see, is a bird of prey or not? But Rashi, he comes and says it all started, this whole Masorah thing, because of one Rashi. Rashi says we don't know how to check if a bird is dores or not. We're not so sure. So therefore, we only eat a bird b'masoret. We need to have a tradition if the bird's okay. So the question with Turkey is that there's no tradition because it's a new world bird. It came from America, just like there was no corn before they discovered America in Europe and all those other lands. There's also many different, buffalo or bison. Bison is a native animal to America, to the US, to North America. These are things that didn't have in the old world. So there's obviously no tradition. So the problem is that maybe like 200 years after the Spaniards brought birds to Europe, turkeys to Europe, it started spreading all over Europe and the Jewish communities were eating it. But then 200 years later, maybe 100 years, 200 years later, all these rabbis, these early achronim or gedolei achronim in Europe, they started asking themselves, wait, why are we eating turkey? How is this mutar? It's not, there's no tradition to it. And we go like Rashi. And the Shulchan Aruch as well, he holds like that Rashi. The Shulchan Aruch has one exception that he brings from Rav Zerachia Halevi. The Rav Zerachia Halevi, he writes that we have a tradition that if it has like the feet look like the bird of a duck, and the beak looks like a duck, then it's kosher. But if it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's a duck, it's kosher. That's what Rav Zerachia Halevi says, and the Menorah Gadol, and the Shulchan Aruch is posek like that opinion. But the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah, is even against that opinion. Say no, we're not somech on that. And this is all based off of a Rosh. It's very interesting. It's a fun sugya to get into. But the Rosh, he moved from Germany to Sfarad, and in Sfarad they were eating certain birds. The stork, I think it was called, and there they were eating that bird. And the Rosh, they asked him, "Is this bird okay?" He's like, "No, don't be somech on what these people do here, Sfaradim. Us from Europe, we have the best tradition, and we're not somech on this Mesorah that they have." And obviously, they didn't have a Mesorah, but the Sfaradim in general, they were going like the Rambam, they're going like the simple Pshat of the Gemara, that you see the Simanim, and that's enough. So the thing with Rashi is that he held that even the non-kosher birds, the 24 birds, could actually have all 3 Simanim. The only thing that tells you if it's kosher or not is if it's not dores. And since we don't know if it's dores, it's a bird of prey or not, therefore, says Rashi, we need a Masorah because it's hard to tell. So this is what started the entire thing, just this Rashi. But even if you read the Rashi, I brought, if you guys text me, if you can ask for my number from Mohad in Rabbi Slifkin, I helped him write this thing about the Tavas, the peacock. And in there, you see that Rashi himself in other places, the Masorah for Rashi is not so complex. It's not like a Masorah that you need for Moshe Rabbeinu. According to the Rashi, if you have a person that says, yes, I ate this bird before, that's enough. Or if you have an expert, a Rav, that's enough as well. So it's not so complex to have this Masoret according to Rashi, but somehow we made it very complex. So besides the fact, are we even posek like Rashi? Right? The Ramban, Nachmanides, he had a problem with this shita of Rashi, and he himself said, you know what, I'm going to go and test the theory. Is it true that you need to have, that these non-kosher birds have all three simanim? So he went and he says, although we don't know all 24 birds that are asur, we know for sure we have a misorah for a few of them. For example, he says the eagle, everybody agrees it's asur. We know that is one of the 24 birds. We know which one, the nesher. We know that's for sure asur. So he actually went, this is beautiful, he went outside and he went and tested, the Torah. He wanted to test to see what is a proper psak in halacha. Right? We find this in Gemara, I think it was Rava, that Rav, he went out and learned how to be a ro'eh bakar for 6 months so he can know what's a mum over, what's not a mum. The Chachamim, they weren't just living in the Bet Midrash. They go outside as well, the real world, to see what's the halacha and investigate using the best methods they have. So he actually went and he shechted some, of course, not to eat, but he opened up, he dissected eagles and other non-kosher birds that he knew were non-kosher. And when he dissected them, he saw that all of them, the ones that he found, they do not possess all three simanim. At most, maybe one, maybe. But they didn't possess all three. So he says, what can we do? He has a beautiful lashon. He says, what can we do? Our eyes see that this is not the case. The halacha is not like Rashi. And therefore, the halacha is like Rav Moshe ben Yosef, he was a chief rabbi, let's say, of Narbona, one of the big hachamim. He said that, the non-kosher birds do not have all three simanim. So once you go with that, then it's very simple. You can check an animal, see the three simanim, or if it has the three simanim, it's not dores. It's not dores, it's kasher. It's the easiest way to check. And that's what, let's say, my Rabbi Ben Chaim, that's what he did. He was somech on that. For the eating the tavas, the peacock, he just said, oh, listen, we don't posek. He held svara-wise, it doesn't make sense to be posek like that opinion of the Rosh and Rashi, because we know it's not the truth. We have empirical evidence for it, that it's not the truth. But regardless, let's say even if you want to say like Rashi, the problem is, and we're posek like the Ramah, the Ashkenazim posek like the Ramah. How do you eat turkey if we don't have a misorah? It's a new world bird. So the answers that people give are unbelievable. I mean, first of all, most achronim, you see, they thought that the turkey did not come from America. It came from Hodu, from India. And that's why it's called Hodu. They thought the bird came from India. And you even write, they even write the Kaf HaChaim in the 1800s, he's writing that, yes, we heard that the Jews from India have a misorah for turkey and they eat it, and therefore we eat it as well. They write this all over the place. But it was completely mistaken because, they didn't have, the Indians didn't have any turkey. And maybe the other Indian, the Native Americans. So, and then another I saw in Sefer Sichat Hulin. He's a big baki in Shechita. He writes that he was afraid to write this, but he wrote it anyways. He says, it must be that the Spaniards, when they went to America, they met some of the lost tribes, the Jews that were lost from the 12 Shvatim, and they had a misorah for turkey, and therefore that's why we eat it. But this is based off like Mormon philosophy. The Mormons hold that Joseph Smith, he met some of these lost Jews, and these Indians, the Native Americans, were really the lost Jews, and they're our brothers in from Eretz Yisrael. But that's obviously that's been proven completely wrong. In you have Mormons going off the derech all the time because they have genetic testing, and they're like, oh my gosh, whoa, they never stepped in the Middle East ever. They have zero, genetic identification that relates them to Israel. So again, that's very preposterous. Rabelsky has a very nice reason why, but the main reason why many Ashkenazim allow it nowadays is because although the Rashi said you need a masoret to see if it's dores, if it's a bird of prey or not, many poskim, they say that if we see after a few generations, we're growing turkeys and it's not dores, that's enough. What Rashi was specifically talking about, that you need a masorah, is, again, masorah according to Rashi is not so strict. It's just, trustworthy people. They say it's kosher, okay, then you can eat it. But regardless, if you're growing turkeys and you see for, 10, 20 years that the turkey is not being dores, it's not going in, bird of prey, that's enough. That's according to Rashi. Some hold that we don't posek like Rashi. Some Ashkenazim were saying we don't posek like Rashi. Others say no, even if we posek like Rashi, it's not a problem, because Rashi was just talking about when you're traveling and you're on vacation. Bird, I'm hungry. There's a bird. You don't know. Okay, that you need a masorah for. But if you're raising them, domesticating them, you see them for many years that they're not being dores, then that would be okay according to Rashi as well. There are a few Ashkenazi Rabbanim that don't eat it. I mean, I think it was the Shlach Kadosh's family, the Horowitz family, they don't eat it. Rav Kamenetsky from Philadelphia, they don't eat it. I think Rav Schechter from YU doesn't eat turkey as well. But it's not so simple. It's really it's a very interesting machloket based off, are you going to allow empirical evidence to decide your halacha when it goes against your tradition of going with a certain opinion? And the fact is that the Ramban proved it. And that's the, how can you argue with that? But that's the crux of it. So yeah, enjoy your turkey in London. Yeah. I see another question. Oh, Yehoshua. Since Thanksgiving is celebrated by most Christians in the States by preceding the feast with a blessing would it be forbidden under Marit Ein for you to do the same feast? Interesting. I didn't know that. Christians do that before every meal. So therefore, I would apply the same question, can we even eat a meal now because the Christians do it for Avodah Zarah? So I don't think we would go that far. The main thing is that, you look outside, people are off celebrating Thanksgiving because secular reasons. They don't care about, the reason why we celebrate Thanksgiving. People don't even know the reason why. It's not so clear even in the history books. So therefore, I don't think it's a problem. Alrighty, guys.
And just
anybody else? No.
Sorry, I think you were going to end it then. But one quick question from me: if something was permitted by the Bavli, or even better by the Torah, and it fell out of practice, but was then adopted by the Goyim as a practice which they do, and we no longer do, would that be considered Huchat HaGoyim? Something, I'm obviously thinking Hishtakavaya or something along those lines. And so, would any of the opinions that we read forbid Hishtakavaya today because of Huchat HaGoyim?
Right, exactly. That's a very good point. The second you mentioned that's what also popped in my brain as well, the Hishtakavaya. Because of course, that's according to the Talmudic law, and Harambam, let's say, when you are doing the Amidah and you're saying the 5 bowings, you are actually supposed to go on your knees. Arbit Kaim, you're supposed to go like Shlomo HaMelech did, go on your knees. That's the halacha. And nobody knows why we don't do it nowadays. Even I think Rav Kafech, they asked him in a teshuvah, like, how come we're not doing it? He's like, I have no clue. So Rabbeinu Avram ben Arambam, he talks a lot about it. He was really trying to already, in Mitzrayim, the Jewish community stopped doing Hishtahavaya. Again, you have Kirya and Hishtahavaya, 2 different types. But he was trying to promote it and bring it back again. And there he actually writes in his Teshuvot that, who cares if the Goyim are doing it, the Muslims are doing it? It's not a problem. We're doing it first. Who cares? And we saw, the simple pshat of the Gemara is, even if the Goyim are doing it, since we find them according to the Torah, it's okay. Especially, this is throughout the Torah, Hishtahavaya, it's all over the place. It wouldn't be a problem. From the Gaon de Vilna, sounds like it would be a problem, because he held, since the Christians are doing this something with the tree, therefore we shouldn't do it either in our synagogues as well. But I don't know if you saw it, Rabbi Yosef, but you can see from Rabbeinu Avram and Ramam, you can remind me, I can send it to you, the Teshuvah, that he talks about. It doesn't matter that he writes explicitly exactly what you're saying. It doesn't matter that the Goyim do it, they copy it, we did it before, and it's right. And if it's right, it's right. Who cares? I mean, his shita was you could even copy good things that they do. It's not considered hukot, because if it has tam, the varshet tam, It's not a problem at all.
I think we skipped over Mr. Sassoon's question in the chat, but I think this possibly answers that.
Right. Exactly. Same concept. Even if they start copying us for that as well. Yeah, that's the problem with the other shita that hells no. Once the goyim start doing it, we can't do it. Like, they can cancel out everything if they start copying us in many things. So
Could it be argued there's a difference between a minhag or just a custom that we have and an actual, because like Halakat Nerot is an actual Niswa Rabbanan.
Halakat Nerot is a mitzvah derabbanan, correct? It is a
correct.
mitzvah.
So could it be argued that there's a difference between that and minhag?
That's a good point, Hazak. Yeah, that's a good point. Could be that's why they go into Vilna by just a minhag of putting trees that he wouldn't allow, whereas as opposed to a halakha, even if they copy us, no, that's a very good point. That makes a lot of sense. That could be it. And but going back to what Rabbi Yosef said is that by Ishtahavaya and Kirya, according to Talmudic law, that is a halakha also, so it wouldn't be a problem anyways also. But that's a good point. If it's just a minhag and they start copying it, maybe. But according to Rabbi Avram and Rambam, the way he writes it, it's like, it doesn't matter. If they copy us, that's their fault. That's not our fault. We don't have to change it. Hukotechem is when you are copying them because you want to be similar to them. Then that's all. We don't stretch it even more. We don't stretch it, when we're eating Chinese food, we don't want to be like them. We just want to eat, good food. That's it. It's not, you don't have to go that far. That's personally, that's what I think.
Okay, so we'll close it for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Rav. Happy Thanksgiving. I think after that presentation, we can celebrate it, even according to some.
Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, that's all, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.